marginaria e agora pode ver. Crime, difamações da esquerda e da TV. Vai ofuscar a verdade que milhões estão conhecendo, sendo levado nos braços do povo em agradecimento. Cada estado a multidão em espera do Bolsonaro, em mistura de fogos, abraços, ovacionado. Quantos deputados cê viram assim ser recebido? Quantos deputados cê viram ser chamado de mito? Cada dia que se passa é difícil continuar as mentiras que inventaram pra tentar te derrubar. A esquerda acusa de fascista por não ter do que acusar, pois não pode chamá-lo de corrupto no lugar.
Não é que eu falo o que o povo quer ouvir. Eu sou o que o povo quer. Estou desafiando qualquer programa de televisão. Bota lá Aécio Neves, Lula, Jair Bolsonaro, Desiste 10. Duvido que eu não ganhe de todos eles juntos.
Se é campanha antes da hora, então agora vou reverter. Presinar o... Moço dente, que desculpa que vai ser. Pode não tocar na rádio, mas tá na boca do povo. Reaça, não foge à guerra, reagiremos de novo. Quer saber quanto nós somos? Vem ver a recepção de quem vai sem esperar ganhar mortadela e pão. Diferente dos que usam do problema pra crescer, foi o povo que pediu, escolhendo JB. Jair, deputado do caminho, Bolsonaro, Messias predestinado. Eu penso que sou negado, o liderado. Da juventude, injustiçado pela esquerda, mas vence pela atitude. Mas que hora de se levantar? De que lado você vai ficar? Que a verdade seja dita. Quem é o melhor pra nós? Mas que hora de se levantar? De que lado você vai ficar? Que a verdade seja dita. É o melhor pra nacional e suas letras desonesta, inversão de bem ou mal é se arriscar constantemente por quem não te valoriza. O salário miserável, o preço da sua vida, pra ele se proteger dos molotov é ser fascista. Sair de casa e não saber se volta é ser polícia. Ao vivo na rota para o goi, pra roda, pra PM de bem é um grande salve. mas não morrem de overdose, morrem de tiro, trocando tiro no fogo cruzado com bandido. Família indenizada do malandro que morreu, a família da vítima dele que se fudeu. O nome é direitos humanos, mas confundi, não é pra ser humanos, direitos só depois que entendi. Respeito a cultura, mas o rap não é isso. Há uma grande diferença de bandido e desfavorecido. Tudo bem que os dois se encontram na favela, mas o desfavorecido estuda pra sair bela. Dois amigos de infância se reconhecem de vista. De um lado é traficante, o outro virou polícia. Não é a dificuldade que leva alguém pro crime, apenas sua escolha de onde fica o seu time. Um salve pro FAO, os vagabundos treme. Meu presente a vocês, hashtag Viva PM. Viva bem alto a PM do Brasil. Viva bem alto a PM do Brasil. Viva bem alto a PM do Brasil. Coração vai coragem, na mão direito fuzil. Viva bem alto a PM do Brasil. Viva bem alto a PM do Brasil. Viva bem alto a PM do Brasil. Coração vai coragem, na mão direito fuzil. Vem se espalhando, o rap de direita apenas está começando. Hip hop também nosso, e são vocês quem segregam. Então forte é um rap de esquerda, pra cada linha uma vela. Rap do Bolsonaro, ponto inicial da queda. Começou no Brasil e toca na Venezuela. Malcolm Max, Marighella, tudo com M de merda. Bolsonaro, inspiração de guerra, a direita não se entrega.
Avante, chega em frente, que o povo já está contigo. Sua arma, sua verdade, tortura aos inimigos. Futuro presidente, escute bem o que eu digo. Vamos mudar a história, acredite bem e vem comigo. Pobre, não mais voluntário, bicho. Massa de manobra, muito tempo fui usado. Eu não sabia, não conhecia, não. Do outro lado, não. Eu acordei, não ele me acordou. Agora vejo mais clara a real e triste situação. Já há muito tempo ele vem alertando o Brasil que tem uma quadrilha que roubou e rouba o país. Mas agora sim temos esperança. Eu confio em 2018, tá chegando o mito. Avante, segue em frente, que o povo já está contigo. Sua arma, sua verdade, torture aos inimigos. Presidente, escute bem o que eu digo. Vamos mudar a história, acredite bem e vem comigo.
É Brasil, eu morri. Tentar reviver o patriotismo que existia, mas tá morto em você. Esperar-se necessário aqui. Ninguém vai correr. Bolsonaristas se preparam, treina alvo enquanto lê. Se preparar é conhecer o minutinho. Não há nada que acusem que eu não já tenha lido no decálogo. Eles não estão para diálogo. Mentir, ignora a verdade, é algo planejado.
Avante, segue em frente, que o povo já está. Sua arma, sua verdade, torture aos
junto. Um salve Thalita Caldas. Eu uni Angola, Brasil e Venezuela. Viva o rap de direita.
Eu nasci em uma data feliz, bem depois do dia 16. Por eu ser um menino sem pai, fui criado com titio Inês. Titio era cuiabano, nessa lida também me criei. Ele era criador de gado, no seu regime me acostumei. Tinha laço todo de madeira, não escapava uma reis do mangueiro, deixava correr 30 dias por mês. Em viagem pra Mato Grosso, na comitiva de um calabres, titio me deu Morro Pampa e atendia por nome português. Foi tirado da tropa Rio Grande, outra escolha melhor não ter. Eu deixei pra mostrar minha ciência, quando lá em Mato Grosso eu cheguei. Eu bandei a rédea do Pampa e o laço pegou pela trava na xincha o zebu já na janela, Jubiliana, Clarice e Inês. Uma delas estava me gabando, mal da surra vocês. E a luz fizeram a chave, o meu 30 da 5 para mostrar minha ciência melhor, o capricho me eu soltei. Ele tinha as lampas revessas e o laço escapou da cabeça. Pelas duas mãos eu lacei outra vez. O patrão me chamou lá pra dentro, eu entrei como o jeito que fez. Eu entrei no salão de visita, lá fiquei arrodeado das três. Perguntou qual era a mais bonita, e por eu passei. Respondi, todas as três são iguais, foi do jeito que eu desapurei. A mais velha é uma flor do campo, a do meio é um cravo vermelho, a mais nova é uma rosa quando está de ver. Na hora da despedida, foi preciso eu falar o português. O meu coração ficou roxo, foi na cor de um alho chinês. Eu deixei pra dar meus 3 quilos, quando posto pra agradecer. As meninas me escreveram cartas, brevemente a resposta eu mandei. Vou tomar linha Sorocabana, vou rever as 3 cuiabanas, vou ver Juliana, Clarice e Inês.
My fellow Americans, are you tired of the new normal? Are you tired of the lies?
Election fraud. You know, the thing that the mainstream media and big tech says doesn't exist?
We must keep going. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving.
Many of you are sitting here because you're wanting to know what your plan is.
The solution has been in front of us all along.
Ask God if you should step in the gap and become a part of the plan.
The plan is simple.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. We are the plan.
If you're waiting for others to do work for you, you're waiting a long time.
We are conservative daily.
Hey, welcome back to the Conservative Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Holtman. Today is going to be a couple of bombshells, actually bombshells related to election fraud to the show, but I'm a little stoked about this particular day because this morning I was having a conversation with my wife, and I said, listen, the big part of what we're dealing with right now is that there is so much evidence, but they're not listening. So we talked a little bit about this a couple days ago. We were going to put together a 3-hour show. I was going to call them all for areas in the 3-hour show that we would show all over the country. And we'll just have people on. I mean, we could probably do it all day. And in large part, that's what this summit is about. So we have the Moment of Truth Summit. It's the summit that Mike Lindell is putting on in Missouri. We will be there. There'll be a lot of people that will be there. We'll be going live there for the entire time. If you got one of the text messages or emails from us, I did send it out to, I think we sent it out to about 8.9 million people on the text side, and we sent it out to nearly 14 million on the email side. So we just want as many people as possible to go to Frank's Speech. If you can't get it on Frank's Speech, you'll be able to get it on a Bannon show. If you can't get it on Bannon, you'll get a right side broadcast. You can get it there. You can get it on Conservative Daily. It'll be broadcast everywhere, all 12 hours, both days, the 20th and the 21st. So a lot of things to go over there. Our guest today, by the way, is one of the first pioneers in what we've been dealing with this election fraud dating back to 2020. Jeff Lindbergh is a nation-state vulnerability expert. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering. He's a security and vulnerability expert. He had a 31-year career at Sandia National Labs, 17 years in vulnerability assessments of high-value U.S. systems, nuclear weapons facilities around the world. He was tasked by the federal government finding vulnerabilities and determining how they can be fixed, patched, or blocked before bad actors could cause harm to those assets. He's one of the most knowledgeable equipment experts in the country when it relates to election equipment, has significant experience with election fraud dating back decades, and a decade. And part of involved in-depth investigations of election equipment in Antrim County, Maricopa County, Otero County. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in now. He's got some stuff that he wants to go over related to Michigan. And we're going to play up front after we introduce you to him. We're going to play a 6-minute clip of what he did in Otero County. I think it was Michigan, right, Mr. Producer? Michigan.
Yeah, several counties.
Yeah. So we'll play that in a minute as well. But let's welcome Jeff to the show. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You know, I had a chance to meet you way back in 2020. I think you came to my home. You also met with Draza, and you walked through a bunch of information related to the election fraud, and you were way ahead of your time. In other words, you had information that now others are starting to discover in different counties around the country, but you were the one that came out initially with the Antrim County report and said, hey, here's what's happening in Michigan.
Yeah, actually, if you go to depernalaw.com, the expert witness reports in that case, in the Antrim case, are on the website. There's 20 expert reports. They all have an executive summary. I'm the author of about 10 of them, 10 or 11 of them, but it also has other experts in there as well that you recognize their names. So you can go get the expert reports, and yeah, we started that. We started putting those out in early 2021. We spent a lot of time in Michigan.
All right, so tell the audience a little bit about, just give us an overview on what you found. I'm past the point of angry because they keep saying that they're, election deniers, conspiracy theorists. Jeff, is it a conspiracy that the election machines are designed to defraud the American people's voice?
Well, look, it's not sure until we prove it. All I can say is there's incredible evidence pointing in the direction that our election system is essentially Swiss cheese. So my expert opinion is that the election system we have in the United States today is just shot through every stage of it with vulnerabilities that a bad actor can utilize to take over our election system on a mass scale. Doesn't take a ton of people to do it. I keep trying to tell people this. We're talking about 2 or 3 people nationwide could control the elections for the entire United States. Okay, that's my opinion, and I wrote that up in some of my expert reports in Antrim.
So Jeff, Clay Parikh spoke and was a tester for a company that was hired by Dominion, because Dominion had to hire a company, and he testified that they stopped him from getting access to the root files, to the source code, and that's where they stopped. And they said, you're not allowed to do vulnerability testing on this part of the system. Do you think that they've kept us away from that source code because it's written into the code, and that these are triggers in the code itself? What do you think that... Yeah.
Well, that's one of the huge red flags, right? Because if you wanted to get to the bottom of stuff, if there's no problem there, they would give us the source code. Right. Just hand it over, say, hey, look, have at it. I mean, all the states, have it in escrow. So any state could turn that code over for the machines, but they haven't done that. What I'm going to talk about in Michigan is stuff that small team figured out from, looking at election files, encrypted election files. We could not get things to misbehave the way I was trying to in my testing because I had no access to source code at all. So, had I had access to source code and had I been at Sandia with a team of 50 people, we would have been able to trace things down within, a matter of a few months and get to the bottom of whether there's anything there or not. But we haven't had access. So we've been blocked access. And in fact, that's one of my main points in the Otero County testimony that I gave on August 11th. And I want to tell people, if you want to get the context to this discussion today, please go watch that 1 hour and 20 minute. It's that one. My testimony starts about 20 minutes in, goes for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. Aaron Clements does a great job after that. And then Cynthia Butler, I think it is, does the last part of the testimony. So if you go there, you need to get the context.
Jeff, are you okay with us re-syndicating that live across our channel, Mr. Producer?
I spoke with them about that last night. So for everyone who's listening, whether you're live or not, I'm posting this in every chat, in every comment, and we will be live streaming that again so that it is on Conservative-Daily. We'll have a special watch party for it. And we'll also be sharing this 6-minute video because it's super, super important that you understand what's in there.
So let's, Jeff, give us some context on, thank you, Greg. And by the way, I'm not going to call, for you guys watching, I'm not going to call Apollo. I call him Greg Apollo. I go back and forth. Mr. Producer when he's on the show because frankly, he's not actually the producer. He's the director, but he's playing the producer. He's wearing that hat. So because you guys all recognize who he is. But with that said, Jeff, give us some context of what's in the 6-minute video, because we're going to play it right now. I want to play that right up front. Okay. And then but tell us what we're going to see, and then we have so much more to get in with you, so I'm going to try and move as quickly as possible to get all this done.
Okay, so let me put it in context here. So the testimony I gave actually was trying to summarize in Otero a year's worth. I literally dedicated a year. I dropped my contracts. God led me to do this for a year, okay? So I was condensing that down into 1 hour, basically 1 hour and 20 minutes. So that's the context of it. And I went to all the states. talked about just highlights in different states. In Michigan, the reason I'm going to that one has to do with the fact that we're up against the deadline. So most of your listeners probably know that after 22 months, all of the authorities are allowed by law to destroy all of the evidence, all the ballots, everything gets destroyed after 22 months, and most counties do that. They shred it all. So we have a few weeks left, not many, before we hit that deadline. And after we hit that deadline, there will be no chance at all to count the ballots, to go look at any ballots again, because they'll all be destroyed, okay? Now, early on, and this is actually in that video that we put out, Joe, that Andrew put out, the documentary that you and I are both in. What's it called? Standing in the Gap video. They have all the Democrats saying, hey, we have to have the paper ballots, because if there's ever any question, we'll just go look at the paper ballots. Okay? But then they've made it impossible to look at the paper ballots.
Right.
Okay? Instead, what they do is machine recounts over and over and over. And then the few places, one or two, where they actually did a paper ballot count, it was all screwed up. And I can show that, okay, that it was messed up in those few cases that they did it. So, hey, we have a chance here to count one specific race, and that's what I tell about, and why I'm pointing at that race has to do with my time in Antrim. It's not in any of my expert reports. It's something I held out because I was trying to get to where I could absolutely prove it. And I can't prove it, but there's strong indications that there was something very wrong in a specific race in Michigan having to do with the Supreme Court justice.
Okay, so you said you can or you can't prove it?
I cannot prove it, because the only proof I would have is if I had the source code and I could trace it through to see what it actually did with it, okay? So what I'm going to do is watch the clip. It'll explain it, and then we can talk about it. But that's what it is. It's a specific race that I would like to see the people, all the townships, and the townships have their own tabulators. They have their own ballot boxes. I want a bunch of townships to count a single race in Michigan, and we can talk about why. And the video will explain it.
All right, let's go ahead and play the 6-minute clip.
Okay, and Jeff, just so you know, I will have your audio on, so I know we're probably just going to play it straight through, and then we can go back. But if anything does come up, just let me know, and I can pause it.
Okay.
And then if I can wrap up with this, okay? This is just a special request. So, as you might all know, by federal law, all the records have to be kept for 22 months after the election. Well, guess what? We're almost there. September 3rd, every jurisdiction can go destroy everything. They can destroy all the paper ballots. They can destroy all the evidence from the 2020 election. So there'll be forever a question. Was there additional issues? Were there, my question. There's a lot of red flags here, guys. I really would like to know if the machines have been compromised or not. I don't know, but there's a lot of red flags here. So a bad actor, of course, is working really, really hard, and maybe that's why we have such massive resistance, to make sure we don't get access to those ballots, okay? Well, we've got one last opportunity in the next few weeks, nationwide. And what I will tell you is that, you can see on the screen there, something that's not been revealed anywhere else, because I couldn't prove it, but in a few weeks there'll be no chance of proving it one way or the other. And what that is that when I was in Michigan, I happened through a series of circumstances to discover something in their election. And what it was the Michigan Justice of the Supreme Court race or contest in 2020. There were 7 candidates running. You got to select 2. And at this point, our team, small team, had managed to decode the election files. Now, we had decrypted them, we decoded them. We understood about 95% of these hex files, so they're not in any standard format. We just figured it out, okay? And there were memory pointers, a whole series of memory pointers in the different election files and so on. And we'd been studying it, and I recognized something. And out of the blue, I got pointed, because of this recognition, at this particular race. I hadn't looked at it all. I don't know any of these candidates. And what I discovered was that 3 of the candidates in this race were treated differently in the programming. Now, someone may say, well, yeah, but it was an odd race. 7 people, you get to choose 2. Maybe that's why they were treated differently. But there was another race on this ballot that was almost identical to this, and they weren't treated any differently. They were treated the same way as all the other races and contestants. So the 3 that were treated differently were Mary Kelly, Brock Schwartzy, and Elizabeth Welch. Okay, you can see them on the ballot there. They were pointing off into a different memory sequence or memory location. They had a different pointer. It wasn't in the correct sequence to follow all the others. Okay? And it pointed to some files where there were bytes that were extra that the others didn't have. So then I thought, well, I need to find out, who is Mary Kelly? I didn't know, so I did some checking. Turns out Mary Kelly had been previously elected a Supreme Court justice in the state. She was a Republican and had already served as Supreme Court justice. And the woman that ended up winning turned out to be Elizabeth Welch, who was a total newcomer. Okay? Happened to be Democrat. So turns out the result was flipped. The result flipped the court. Okay, I'm not saying the result was flipped. The result flipped the court. So because she won, now the court had 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Prior to that, it had 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Okay, had Mary Kelly won, it would still be 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. So it had a very significant outcome. But I never could figure out how to trigger it, so I never really wrote it up. It didn't end up in an expert report. But I don't know. It looks to me like there's the possibilities, in fact, strong possibility, that there was something going on in this race. In fact, I statistically looked at the numbers, and it looks possible that Mary Kelly had a bunch of her votes taken and split between Brock Schwartzy and Elizabeth Welch. Brock Schwartzy is a Republican, and Welch is a Democrat. And it's possible, I'm not saying this occurred, I'm saying there's some strong pointers that say there could be a problem in Michigan in the Supreme Court race. That's what I see down with the bits and the bytes. And so what I would do, I think all of us need to know. I don't care which party you are. I don't really am not for any specific candidate. But I want to know, did they do third-level manipulation? Is someone doing third-level manipulation on these machines? So what I would request, it's not for you guys, unless you want to go do it across the state of New Mexico and elsewhere, but in Michigan, there's a specific way that we can simply check this. And that is the townships there actually have the ballots. The counties, the townships are in charge. They have their own tabulator, they have their ballots, and so on. And so what I would request is that every township in Michigan do a simple thing before they destroy the ballots, is go count the Supreme Court election by hand and see if Mary Kelly really got the votes she got, and if these other 2, Schwartzy and Welch, got the votes they got. It would make me feel, and I hope and pray that people do this en masse, not just 1 or 2, because they'll go do that a couple places, say, see, there's nothing to see, don't anybody else count. They're going to do that. So, but anyway, I'm asking them to do that, right? So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for patiently listening to a very long one, and I'll turn it over to Dave.
So this is a case where the person that had already served lost, and the person at the bottom of the ballot, which is highly suspect, won.
Correct. Now, the other thing, I'll give you a couple more data points that I didn't put in that briefing the other night, and that is when I looked at the statistics in Antrim County, for example, and I looked in a bunch of counties, okay, across the state. But in Antrim County, it's a Republican county. It voted for the Republican candidates over the Democratic candidates, 60-some% to 30-some or something like that, okay? So, okay, if you look at this race, and they're all going to say, okay, but judges are nonpartisan, right? They aren't labeled as Republican and Democrat, but people know who's who, right?
Right.
So if you take the two top Republicans and add their votes, and you take the two top Democrats and add their votes, and the two top Democrats won the state, okay? You take the two top Republicans in, say, Antrim County and add the votes, lo and behold, the Republicans get 37% of the vote and the Democrats get 47% of the vote. And the other three candidates get the other, 14% or whatever it is, 16%. So that's highly unlikely in a Republican county where the Republicans voted for Republicans something like 60-40.
And they know that they're Republicans.
Oh,
they
yeah.
know.
Yeah, of course they know who they are. So, it just smells bad. It's a huge red flag. Okay. The other thing I saw looking across a whole bunch of counties is that if you take and split the votes, not even say it comes from Mary Kelly, but if you look at the votes for Welch and Schwartzy, okay, I think it's Schwartzy, not Schwartzel. I may have that wrong. Schwartzel. Okay. If you look at those across all of the counties and eliminate the big ones, eliminate Wayne and Oakland and the other big counties because all kinds of 2,000 mules stuff was going on there. So forget all that. Go to the smaller counties, small to medium-sized counties, and lo and behold, the difference between these two candidates typically is less than 5%.
Right.
It's very close. It's like, in some cases, they had almost exactly the same vote count. Okay? So you're going, wait a second, how does this happen? How do, across a whole slew of counties, do these two candidates keep coming up with vote counts that are so similar? Okay? Well, think about it for a second. If you took, and I'm not saying this happened, I'm just theorizing as a bad guy, okay, bad actor. If I took a bunch of Mary Kelly's votes, thousands, and I split them between the other two, and the other two maybe should have looked like the other three candidates, the other two or three that didn't get that many votes, if you do that, then lo and behold, what's going to happen is they're always going to have a similar vote because the votes they're being given are much more than the votes they actually got. Okay, so you're going to see some variation, but that variation is going to be the actual vote count versus the one that may have been substituted for it, if you follow what I'm saying. So there's these strong indicators there that something went on, and people will say, but Mary Kelly lost the state by 140,000 votes or something like that. And what I'm trying to tell people is, wait a second, if this was done systematically across the state, let's say it does exist. Let's just hypothesize it exists. And it might even exist in ES&S machines as well as Dominion machines. Who knows? I mean, our system is like Swiss cheese. Okay, a guy like me, bad actor, I would go for those two. I would subvert them both. They wouldn't even know they're subverted. The people programming stuff, running the elections, wouldn't even know anywhere. Okay, wouldn't know. They wouldn't have to even be in the state to do it. All right? So if you subvert across the state and you're doing this percentage in each one of the counties, the number is astronomical. It's several times more than what she lost by. Okay? So yes, it could actually have been done to where it affected this race. It absolutely could have. Now, it sounded like I was asking, everybody to count everything. I think the Gateway Pundit article, and that's not what I'm asking for. What I'm asking for is one race to be counted. We don't need every township to count it, but we need a significant number so that we can get some real data here. Not just one or two, but we need a bunch of townships to go and count them all over the state. And especially I'd like the small ones to do it. Because I'm not saying the county did anything wrong. County workers, election workers, anybody. If these machines are subverted, then I don't need anybody in the state to know. I don't need the candidates to know. I don't need Secretary of State to know. I don't need anybody in the state to know, and I can mess with you. And I demonstrated it on that video back in May of last year, how I could manipulate the vote in the machine. And I can tell you, I could do that remotely. If it's in the election file. The election file is generated from the designer software. There's only one copy of that software, okay? I mean, there's one design for that software that's used all over the country. So if I subvert that, I own the election system for the United States. Okay, so that's what I'm asking, is get a bunch of townships, just go count the ballots, and don't wait for judges or anybody. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say this, but it seems to me if they're your paper ballots in your township, you can do anything you want with them.
Okay, so,
I don't know that you got to ask permission.
So I want everybody to understand this. This is evidence. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go straight to it. Right. So there was an article written in the Gateway Pundit on the 11th of August. It was written by Joe Hoff. The evidence shows Michigan's Supreme Court race in 2020 was flipped. Election audit professionals also identified numerous red flags in New Mexico and Arizona. Mr. Producer, if you put up C3. Jeff, this says that the Microsoft SQL software was found in Michigan, New Mexico, and Arizona.
Yeah,
correct.
Yes, exactly. And this is an example of something why I say the system is Swiss cheese. Okay, all places that I've looked for it in Michigan, I found it, or we found it in Michigan. We found it in Maricopa. We found it in New Mexico. This software is sitting on it. It's not in any certification that I can find done on the Dominion machines by SLI.
I've been through all of it. It's not in here.
It's not there. It does not need to be there. It's not required to run the system. Okay, right. It is not required to run their system, and yet it's there. Now, it had no password. In all cases, we could just click on it and go into it. Once you're into it, you've got the keys to the kingdom. There's a very simple exploit which we used, and actually Halderman used in his report up in Michigan, which was you just go find the keys, you save the keys out of the database, you put your own keys into the database, and now you can log into all the Dominion software, do anything you want, because you created your own password. And when you're done, you just go back and put their keys back in. Take your keys out, put the keys back in. So this is a horrible thing, and literally all of their data, everything is in there. How you process the votes when they come in from the tabulator is in the database. It's in tables in the database. You may have seen on that video back in May when I flipped the vote, I did it also on the EMS side. I did it in the tabulator, but then I showed that I could do it on the EMS. I ran one SQL statement to adjust the entire setup of a table, and in there I was flipping votes for every ballot coming out of Antrim.
Jeff, I need to ask you this question. I know the answer to this question, and everyone, I want you to pay attention to this question specifically. Jeff, could you have something that was triggered in the source code that would allow for this database to either be created, we know it was created in Mesa, be created, used, flipped, changed, altered? Could that be triggered based on an event, a percentage, something that once it got to a certain degree, I mean, this is like PID function, right? That it would automatically start replacing votes, switching votes, doing things within the machine? Is that possible that could be created in the source code that could do all the things that you were able to do by clicking on those different things inside the system that were not part of the certification process?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and it's even simple. It's trivial. And the reason is inside that database, in fact, Dominion uses it inside the database. They use a whole bunch of scripts or macros, if you will, depends on what you call them, inside the database. So to process votes. All right. So, hey, you know, as a bad guy, I've done this where I've gone in and subverted stuff where what I did was just added a line in there. Mm-hmm. And in many of these tools, I don't know, I haven't studied SQL, this particular tool, but in many of them, you can actually turn off logging, do something, turn logging back on, and then go do the normal stuff. And you insert it, and no one has a clue that you just mucked with.
Nobody even knows it happened. Now,
no one
Jeff,
knows it's happened. There's no trace of it.
Jeff, let me ask you this question. And again, you know, a lot of the things that we're saying here today, this is obviously recorded. It's out there because I've been studying the adjudication process religiously for the last probably 6 months, which obviously, you know, the adjudication process is owned by a guy named Eric Coomer. But he holds a patent for it that he's now assigned to a different bank. But tired of feeling like someone's always watching on the internet, maybe advertisers know a little too much about you, IPVanish is a solution for you. You can use IPVanish on your computer, tablets, phones. You can use it on multiple devices at the same time without sacrificing speed. For you, and here's the thing, it blocks advertisers, hackers, your ISP, third parties from getting access to information to you, blocks people from getting access to your passwords. All the data is encrypted. And for our listeners, you can get 70% off their yearly plan for listeners with a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's like getting 9 months for free. It's super easy to use. All you do is tap one button. A disclaimer, if you are using things, Truth Social, you have to turn off the VPN. If you are using things like vMix, Chevy apps, or things like that. So there are some things that does need a dedicated IP, and it recognizes that. So just keep that in mind. So go to ipvanish.com/daily, use promo code daily, and save your 70% off. This process that you're talking about, this ability inside the source code to be able to trigger things inside of the system and connect to things that aren't a part of the certification, that shouldn't be on there, that aren't needed to actually run the system. Let me, and again, I want to be concise on this specifically. If you did not know that happened, there's things that are built into the system that would be system logs. Correct? Now, if those system logs were deleted, altered, reduced to a place where they were not giving enough memory to record adequate amount of time, wouldn't that also stop you from seeing any sort of executables in the system that would make those flips?
Yes, so that's another big, huge red flag, okay? And as you probably, I know you know, in Maricopa and other places, they had these tiny little, they said, oh yeah, the system log overran. Oh, it started overwriting itself, you know. And they had this system, they had these system logs that were tiny, and it's like, in today's world, you have a system log that rolls over in a week. You know, this is absurd. Yeah. Absurd. You could make a file easily that would run for years and never overrun. And so it's a huge red flag. Someone set the system logs really small. They shouldn't have been that small. Okay, why would you do that? It's a red flag. It doesn't smell good. Well, you should not be doing that.
Even in the Antrim report, I mean, not the Antrim report, but even in the report in Maricopa County, in Volume 3, it stated that not only were the logs set to be overwritten in a very short period of time, but other logs were manually deleted, and the people we caught on video deleting it actually worked for Dominion.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, that stuff, why didn't that come out in the testimony? Why isn't there someone investigating that, attorney generals or whatever? I mean, that kind of stuff.
Feckless cowards, that's why. Feckless cowards.
We've got to stop that. I mean, how are we going to have trust in the system if when we see obvious things like this going on, no one's following up on it? No wonder 60% of Americans don't trust the election system, right? That's the problem we have right now. And that's why I'm asking, for people to act in Michigan, is because 60% of Americans don't trust the election system. This is not a state that we can afford to be in as Americans. So it's not about, left or right. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about all of us. We have to be able to trust our election system, or we're in real deep trouble. And right now, we don't test our election system. We don't trust it, and we're coming up on an election. So that's not a good situation.
So let me go through this if I can. C3, Mr. Producer, I'm just going to read this stuff for the people that are on the audio version. The Microsoft SQL software was found in Michigan, New Mexico, and Arizona. Is not a part of the certification process. The transparency needs to be where everything is recorded. The only places the ballots can be associated with voters at the polling place.
Yeah, can I talk about that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is a huge deal. They use it all across the country. You go to a voting machine warehouse and they go, oh, you can't take any pictures in here. You can't see anything. You can't record anything. And that is sheer nonsense. Okay? When they're running ballots through high-speed scanners at, any of these, on election night, it ought to be video cameras watching everybody and broadcast to the nation. You shouldn't need an observer to be 6 feet away because you got a video camera on everybody, okay, broadcasting everything in real time. It's nonsense to say that stuff needs to be kept secret. They're misusing secret ballot, okay? So secret ballot, the whole intention is when a person is voting, no one gets to see what they voted on. But as soon as that ballot is separated from the person, the whole point of a secret ballot is so now you can't tell who voted.
Right.
Okay? So the whole idea is anything where a person is not voting, that's the only place we need to limit video is when an actual person is voting on a ballot. Mm-hmm. Everywhere else, full transparency. In Maricopa, what happened to us in Maricopa was we intended, when we first were talking about setting up that audit, the possibility of it, we were going to make it full transparency. We were setting up to live stream video of every ballot and all of the intermediate counts. Each time a batch came off of a table, those totals would go up. It was going to be 100% transparent. A judge in Arizona said, nope, you can't show anything. Okay? Why? Because of secret ballots. So what happened was we had zero transparency. We saw a bunch of people walking around a room, which doesn't help us at all. And then at the end, we had no idea what the count was, and I could have told you up front it was going to come out correct. And because of the fact that they had months and months and months, if they wanted, a bad actor wanted to subvert the system, and there's some red flags that say some shenanigans.
CIA,
may have done,
FBI. I mean, just it's state-sponsored.
Okay, well, I don't know about that.
You won't say it. I will say it. I will say it because I understand system architecture, and I also understand what you would have to do in order to do these things. Right?
Well, let me explain how bad actors can do it, okay, specifically in the Maricopa case. And this could be done anywhere, all right? So in Maricopa, right now everything's electronic, right? So they know who voted, where you voted. Of course, they have the vote count. If they're cheating systematically, they know what the cheat was, okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they know what they need to make up, all right? So we
know, by the way, every ballot box was open. They weren't secured. They were open with ballots everywhere inside the Maricopa. We know that happened, right?
Correct. With the exception
of the ones that they set
aside. No, there was a team. I know one of the table managers that was there for the first half of that count in Maricopa. Okay, one of the initial guys, he said there was one pallet perfectly sealed. It was the first one they counted. So there was one pallet that perfectly done, perfectly sealed. All the other ones had been opened. Everything else had been opened. No seals, no nothing.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, with the CVR, with the electronic records that you have, and knowing what you told them the answer was, all you have to do is go to a place that has a capability like Runbeck, who demonstrated you can take them a ballot that's been somehow spoiled, and they'll put out a new ballot, and they label it duplicate, but they put out a new ballot with the votes on it that look like someone voted, okay? So look, we did it in Michigan. We went and made our own ballots. We took PDFs, we filled them in, we went to a copier center, and we copied them for test ballots.
And you put them through the system and no problem?
Oh, we put them through thousands and thousands of times, something like 40,000 times, okay? And no problem at all. So there is no check on these things at all. We just get the right paper and make the ballots, and you can run them through. So the red flag I see in Maricopa is that one pallet that was perfectly sealed. Could it be that they said, okay, we got to fix this. The numbers aren't going to come out right. So we'll just go ahead and, make a pallet worth of ballots that have the right counts on them. And people say, how could they do that with 2 million? Well, it's all electronic. Computers do it. Right. You sit down and figure it out, and the computer program, puts out the PDFs and you print them, okay, at a printer, and you're done. Then you box them up and you seal them and you've got them there. And they had many, many months to do that. If they wanted to do that, if a bad actor wanted to do that, they could do that, okay? So that's Maricopa. There was a lot of other stuff in my briefing about Maricopa, so you might want to go see that video, the Otero video, because there was a lot more in there.
And we're going to play it in its entirety. It's an hour and 20 minutes long. I think it's very important that everyone sees that. We're not walking away from 2020. I don't care what anybody says. We're not walking away from 2020. And I don't want to get into this idea that there had to be 1,000 different bad actors, because, Jeff, you and I are completely aligned. It would take 1, 2, maybe 3 people. And this would explain, by the way, Eric Coomer being the person that was talking to the media, being the person that was selling it, being the person that was helping write code, being the person that was on security, being the person that was on development. You can't have that many. You could have a whole bunch of people that work for Dominion. You could have a whole bunch of people that work for ESNS. They could all be lefties. It doesn't mean that they would subvert an election, but you could have a few people that would subvert it, that could tell people over here to build a system to do X, Y, and Z, knowing the vulnerabilities would be created and the rootkits or code diversions could be put into the source code itself, which Parikh said that's what they wouldn't let him test. And Jeff, if you were to test it, you'd be able to find it. Yeah. And they've kept us away from the source code on purpose.
Yeah, they have. Now, by the way, back to what you're saying there about 1 or 2 people doing it, and people don't understand this. The designer software that's used to create the ballots in the election all over the country, okay, it's the same software from the company. ESNS has their own, Dominion has their own, okay? But there's one program that does that. If I get in and subvert that program as a bad guy, either an outsider or an insider, either one, if I get in and subvert that program, I own all of Dominion's machines. Okay, I demonstrated I can flip an election file. I can manipulate an election file. I don't even need to manipulate the tabulator, okay? So I can own the election if I get a hold of their software. Now, the people that run it, I've got the log files, okay? I've spent hours and hours going through their log files. They're just pushing buttons that run scripts. Oh, run this script, run that script. 99% of the employees of Dominion are just clicking buttons that run scripts, and they have no idea what's in the script. They don't know what it's doing.
And Dominion Voting Systems has an entire process, a plant, where their coders are in Serbia. Yeah, in Serbia. And frankly, those guys are terrible coders, and they have a QA problem. And typically, the reason why you have a QA problem where all the things break the way that they're breaking right now is because you're hiding things. You don't want people to get in there and QA it because they might see something that will then eventually get themselves killed, right? I mean, in other words, I saw that this had a rootkit in here, or this had a code diversion here, or deviation here, and they report it, and all of a sudden they figure out what that deviation does, or they get curious and go through it. All of a sudden they wake up being pushed off the cliff of getting on a train, right? So these are real risks. People that would go through stealing in elections, these are serious things. And the things that you've been able to find are things that we know as coders. I'm not a coder. I'm a system architect expert. And anybody could sit me down. You could hand me a system and I could tell you how it works. From soup to nuts. I could draw you out an entire map, show you where the friction is, where it isn't, mathematically tell you how to get from A to Z. I could do all of that. Now, I don't code. But as you get through these different things and you start seeing Parikh talking about code, you talking about code, you talking about what the system output logs are showing, it's impossible to come to a different conclusion, isn't it, Jeff? I mean, I'm just trying to be Captain Obvious here.
Look, as an expert witness in Antrim, I come to the same conclusion. This system is Swiss cheese. I'm going to read you a statement that's in my briefing from Larry Carella. He's an auditor type guy, and he says, here's another thing you learn about auditing. The more chaotic the system, the more chances for fraud. So when you come across a system that is extra chaotic on purpose, that tells you that the people running it want it that way for a reason.
Boom. Repeat that for me again, Jeff. I need you to repeat that for the people in the back of the room. Guys in the back of the room, we're going to be telling you, here you go. It's coming to you. Go ahead.
Larry, it's a quote. I'm quoting Larry Carella. It's on the web. You can find it. Here's another thing you learn about auditing. The more chaotic the system, the more chances for fraud. So when you come across a system that is extra chaotic on purpose, that tells you that the people running it want it that way for a reason. Now let me give you a couple examples of this real quick. Okay, and it's in my briefing, but I want to hit this. The security logs. People don't know this. On the interface, the RTR interface, which is the result telling reporting interface Dominion has. They have a checkbox. When you go to read that memory card that came over from a tabulator out in the field somewhere,
I read this, but
there's a checkbox, okay? Whether or not you want the security log. All right? So guess what? In New Mexico, the places I've been, they didn't download the security log. Okay? Now, why would you develop software that would not automatically download the security log? Why would you put a button that allowed a inexperienced county election official, and I'm not blaming them, it should not be there.
It should automatically do it. Automatically.
It's a security log. I mean, who do you want to sell the system to? You want to sell it to some people that don't want security on their elections? They need to be able to turn it off because they don't want a secure election? I mean, there's no reason for it to be there. Same thing with images. There's an image button. Okay, you save the images. They're on the card. You have to check a box to get the images downloaded. And for years in New Mexico, in Otero, we found out they weren't downloading the images. They did in 2020. That was the first time. Okay, they had not been downloading the images. So here we have the images, we have the security logs, we have all this stuff that should be automatic. There should be no choice. And yet it's there. In the bigger log file, where I see in Michigan, going back there, going through the Antrim log, what's interesting in the Dominion logs is I actually see in the log file the creation of the template for Michigan.
Wait, say that again. Say that again.
So it's not just the log file for Antrim. It's the log file going all the way back to 2019 when they began to create a template for the 2020 election. The log file that's on the machine goes back before that. So in that log file, you see things like they set the passwords. And you'll see in my stuff that the technician password was 1234556. Okay, apparently that was set in the template, statewide. All right, apparently. I haven't gone and checked all the other counties, but it sure looks that way from the log file. Another thing about turning things off, there's a certificate required for a network connection because they have these, you can network, between the adjudication machines and the EMS and so on and move it over. And so you need a security certificate for the network. Well, guess what? It was defaulted, they turned it off in the template. So in there is a line where they said, oh, by the way, we're just going to not require the certificate. Why would that even be an option?
I'm actually, people don't understand, I'm really mad right now because this is actually definitive proof. They say we can't get to this, we don't have a smoking gun. Well, we don't have it. We have all of the information, everything. We have ballot switching that happened. We have validation because we were able to get CVR files and compare those to the numbers. We have what happened in Georgia. We have the fact that they could not balance logs in Detroit. We have the ASOG report. We have all the proof. We just don't have the dial. We don't have the actual point at which it happened because they haven't given us access to the source code.
Yeah. They haven't cooperated on any. We've had to dig stuff out. I mean, they haven't cooperated anywhere. I mean, many of you know, and I need to say this about the Michigan request I put out. You may not know that the Attorney General of the state, the Friday before, I think it was August 5th, on August 6th, 7th, on Monday morning, I had two reporters wanting comment from me, one from the New York Times, one from Reuters, wanting comments on the fact that the Attorney General in Michigan put out a request for a special prosecutor to prosecute Matt DePerno and his expert witnesses. I was specifically named along with the other ones in there. So, Matt's running.
Jeff, they called me. They had journalists call me and say, well, they gave you a copy of the file. No, they didn't. Matt gave you a copy. No, he didn't. I was like, Matt's not the one that gave me a copy of it. Nobody gave me a copy of it anyway. It was put somewhere, and I went and downloaded it, like everybody else did. So don't do this deal where you're trying to catch Matt doing something wrong. Matt did nothing wrong, right? But they did. They tried to call you, and they're trying to box you in and create something that they can come after us for something that's just not true. They're creating a false narrative, just like they did against Tina Peters in Mesa County.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the odd thing, right? So it just so happens that the race I'm concerned about in Michigan is justice of the Supreme Court. And the case in Michigan, and your listeners may not know this because they've been told something different, the case in Michigan is still open. The Antrim case has not been closed. It has been appealed to the Supreme Court of Michigan.
And the person that you're actually looking at is a Democrat that's on the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
These
you can't make this stuff up.
Jeff. They're evil.
You can't. Well, let me say a word about this, because I'm not a political guy. I'm really not partisan, okay? I'm a follower of Christ, all right? That's what I am. And I'm trying to get to the truth. This whole time, I'm just trying to understand what happened, all right? So that's what we need to understand is what actually happened. It's crazy. I really think we're in a battle between good and evil, and I think there's, unfortunately, I think people on both sides that are bad actors. Okay, so this is not about Republican and Democrat. It's not about left and right.
It's elite.
I can tell you. I can tell you from personal experience. There's places I've been when I was trying to do something, even decades ago, and the people that got in the way were the Republican National Committee. Okay, I was doing an investigation having to do with a Republican candidate that won and then lost late night. And the people that came in and scuttled it and screwed it up, in my opinion, was the Republican National Committee. And it shocked me at the time. I had no idea why they would do that. But now we're seeing this across the scale, is that there are people that are bad actors across the spectrum. Okay? And we all need to get together. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative. We need to have an election system that works fairly. I'm okay with whoever gets elected as long as it was a fair election. Okay? That's what I want to see. God is about the truth. He's a God of truth. That's what we need to be about, is finding out the truth. And that's why I've been compelled, I believe, by him to work on this, is to just get to the truth.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did Mesa ever turn over their database backups? Were you involved in Mesa at all?
I was not involved in Mesa at all. No.
I think you should get involved in it.
Never touched Mesa. No.
So I want to ask, we have so much information to go over with you. We're probably going to have another show. I'm probably going to have you come on for another show after the summit, because I have some questions I want to ask you about what is going to be uncovered at the summit. And obviously the Moment of Truth Summit is happening this weekend, the 20th and 21st in Missouri, and everyone is welcome to watch that on Frank's Beach, watch that on Conservative Daily, as we said before. Jeff, I want to ask you really quickly about this ASOG report, and I want to the report that first came out on December, I think 13th, if I'm mistaken, December 13th.
Yeah.
This report, if you go to the purpose and preliminary conclusions, just halfway down in B, so B number 2, I'm going to read this. I want to ask you if you believe this is true. Page 1, at the very bottom of page 1. We conclude the system is intentionally and purposely designed with influence election results. The system intentionally generates an enormously high number of ballot errors. The electronic ballots are then transferred for adjudication. The intentional errors lead to the bulk adjudication of ballots with no oversight, no transparency, and no audit trail. This leads to voter or election fraud. Based on our study, we conclude the Dominion voting system should not be used in Michigan. We also further conclude the results of Antrim County should not have been certified. Do you believe that to be true?
Let's see. Let me they're the guys that got in for like 8 hours and got the original forensic images, which is what we all worked off of. Okay, they never gave us anything else. So we worked off of those images. What I will say is that overall what they're saying is correct. Okay, but I want to correct something. And that is, and this is what they made a big deal about in the press. Mm-hmm. In a place like Antrim, there was no adjudication process, okay? What they actually saw in the data, and I reported on it in one of my expert reports, you'll see it, is what's called a reversal. It's in the log files. It's in the S-log files, okay? Yeah. So what you see is an extremely high rate of ballots going into tabulators being kicked back out. And then what the operator will do typically is just feed it again. And the second time or the third time it takes it. And away you go. We saw rates anywhere from 20% to as high as 86% reversals in Antrim. Now, they were immediately refed and put in, or if there was a problem with the ballot, they probably spoiled it and made a new one until they got it to feed, okay?
Right.
So pointing at adjudication at that point was not the right thing. However, we saw this kind of reversal rates. We saw big reversal rates. I personally saw this demonstrated in Georgia as well. So here are these machines that are reversing at 15, 20% rates. Now think about it. Think about this for a second logically. If a ballot, you put it in and it reverses because there's something wrong with that ballot, an overvote, you know, it breaks some rule. Something's wrong with that ballot. It's skewed, the markers don't line up. It should always do that. The next time you put it in, it should reverse it too.
Right.
And that's what I found in my testing. If I purposely messed up a ballot, which I did a bunch of, it would always reverse that ballot. Okay? So what's this thing about you put a ballot in, it reverses it, and then you put it in, you know, another time, and it takes it almost every time? What are they doing? Well,
they actually say that in the report. So they did some corrections. They did talk about high adjudication, but they also talked about in Central Lake Township there were 1,222 ballots reversed out of 1,491 total ballots cast, resulting in an 81.96 rejection rate.
Yeah.
All reversed ballots are sent to adjudication for a decision by election personnel.
That's not quite true, because what happens is as soon as they reverse it, and I've talked to personnel, they just feed it again. Okay, it reversed. There's no indication on the screen that says it had an overvote or an error that needed to correct. They feed it again and it takes it. I saw this demonstrated in Georgia. I said, is this what you do? Oh yeah, we all know this. If it reverses it, we just put it in. Now, why would you reverse it? I wondered for a long time, why such a high reversal rate? I mean, there's something wrong if you're getting this super high reversal rate, right? Especially when we created some good ballots, and for the good ballots we created, we could run a good ballot thousands of times without any reversals.
Right.
The machines process them just fine. So why are we getting these huge reversal rates? Well, if that reversal rate occurs in a place where you have an adjudication process, by the way, this is something you can program into the machines. This is another one of those chaotic things. You can put it in the machine that either you want it to go into an adjudication bin, or like the write-in bin. They have a write-in bin, right? Because someone's got to look at that. You can actually program the Dominion tabulators so that if it reverses, it will throw it into that adjudication bin. Okay? That's not what they were doing in Antrim, but you can do that. And certainly in the big city where things are chaotic, I mean, you just push tons of ballots if you want to into the adjudication process.
Yeah.
And you may remember with the high-speed scanners, Missy Martin with her demo that went viral in the fall of 2020 after the election, where she demonstrated with one of the high-speed scanners in the adjudication that basically everything that was scanned on that in that batch, she could go change any vote on any ballot whether it needed it or not. And she demonstrated that on a video. That is a horrendous red flag. That's a huge vulnerability that she, by herself, could go flip any vote she wanted, rearrange any ballot any way she wanted. Okay? So that's a real problem. And
so let me, you know, there's so much more stuff that we have here that I want to go over, but there's a couple things that I want to highlight.
Joe, if I can jump in 1 second, I want to highlight something. So I've sensed, because of Otero and what I learned down in Otero, apparently this was known before, but I didn't learn it until I watched it in Otero, where using the ADA equipment, you put in a blank ballot and it would put votes on the ballot and then reverse it. Okay? Then the 88 person, the one helping the 88 person could verify it, and then they put it in the same slot to tabulate it. When I saw that, I went, oh my God, they've got a printer that prints on the ballot and it makes it look like a human did it. They have a whole bunch of different patterns, so it's doesn't look like it's machine generated. Okay? Now, why is this horrible? Because there's a lot of people that don't vote down ballot races. Right? They don't vote the down ballot races.
But why would they just make it a computer generated deal? Why are they trying to make it look like it's a handwritten deal? That's another problem. Like, why is the machine designed to do that?
It's a huge red flag, right? But here's the deal.
Keep talking about these red flags. It's trying to drive me crazy. I don't think there's any white flags.
Maybe with all of these reversals across the nation, if I was a bad guy, what I'd want to do is condition everybody to know, oh, just feed it. It'll go in the second time. Just feed it.
Yeah.
The machines in Maricopa and in New Mexico, across the state, well, in Maricopa and across the state of New Mexico, have the capability to go in, print on your ballot, one you've already voted on. It'd be very simple in the software as a bad guy to say, oh, they didn't vote on this.
And I know that preparing yourself, your family, making sure that you're able to take care of yourself as the times evolve. I'll remind everyone that you can't go to DCF Guns. If you go to dcfguns.com, you can find all of the locations. They have the Castle Rock location, as well as 2 down in Colorado Springs, east and west. If you go to dcfguns.co, it will take you to their online store, and you can find a ton of awesome stuff on there. Go get training, go arm yourselves, get ammo, get the things you need. So that's dcfguns.co.